Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. In our Terraform Infrastructure as Code automation series, I'm going to use Azure subscription for the demonstration and the automation. The reason for that is I have the Azure subscription and I am more close to the Azure cloud as I'm working on the Azure cloud since last 8 years. But that doesn't mean that these videos are only focused on Azure. These are the general concept on Terraform. The primary focus is on how Terraform works and how do you utilize the Terraform to automate your infrastructure. So even though if you're working on AWS, Google or any other cloud provider with Terraform, that should help you. With that, let's continue our discussion, and in this video we're going to provision a simple Azure service manually just to understand how do you create the infrastructure manually from your cloud provider user interface. As I said, in this example, I'm going to take Azure Cloud as a demonstration for the demonstration. Hence, I'm going to log into the Azure portal with my credential and I'll try to provision a simplest service in Azure. So I'll connect to portal.azure.com. Here is my Azure portal dashboard wherein I can navigate to all my Azure resources using this particular menu item, which is all resources. I can create a new resource with this particular option, or I can search a new or existing item from these options. Let's create a new Azure resource, which is storage account, which is the simplest resource to provision in Azure. So I'll search for the storage account here. As you can see that the storage account option is already available. Even though if the services which you are looking for is not available here, you can simply search here to create that service. As I already have the service name which I want to create available here, so I'll simply click create here itself. Next, it will ask you to fill in some of the mandatory parameter in order to provision that particular service. For example, we are creating a service for let's say Azure. So we are creating a storage account in Azure. So it will require a resource group. So I'll say YouTube TF demo, which is YouTube Terraform demo. And then here we need to provide the name of the storage account. As per the naming convention of the storage account, it should be small characters with number only, and maximum it can go up to 24 character, as you can see here from the hint section. Next, the region you can choose if you want to change. I would like to keep as is. The redundancy option, I'll change it to the LRS. Our objective of this demonstration is not to walk through the complexity or the configuration of the storage account. It is just to walk through how do you provision the infrastructure in Azure from the Azure portal. So I'll keep all these remaining options as is, as it has a default configuration. So I'll click next, next, and next, and then I'll go to the review section. Once you click on review section, it will show you the selection which you have opted while choosing the different tabular configuration. Now, if you look at here, I can click on the create button to create the Azure storage account with the given name, or I can click here on the download template. That will give me a JSON template. So the way it works, when I click create, basically ultimately it will use the same JSON template which will help me to provision the infrastructure. And how it works, I'll show you in a moment. Let's first of all create an infrastructure with the clicking here on the create button. While it is creating the infrastructure, I'll create a next storage account for the demonstration of creating the infrastructure with the help of ARM template. Again, I'll use the same resource group which I have created in my previous demonstration, and again this time I'll use new st demo. Let's see if it is unique, because this has to be unique. That's why I'm giving some random name here. I'll keep the local redundant. My previous storage account is successfully created. And this time for my second storage account, as it is running the final validation, this time I'll be using this download a template for the automation option. And just to show you that how the infrastructure automation looks like in Azure. So when we were trying to create with the help of clicking on the create button, ultimately it was using the same automation, which is this JSON template. This JSON template is known as the Azure Resource Manager template, which is also known as ARM template. If you look at this ARM template, we have the parameter section, which you can find it here as well. At the moment, there are no variables defined, but you can define the variables as well. You can see that the long list of variables are defined here, which we are not using. Most of them are having the default value itself. Now, if now it comes to the resource block, which has the resource configuration. For example, the name of the resource, which is coming from the parameter. Then you have the type of the resource, then the API version. It is the version of the API which we are using an ARM template to deploy our Azure storage account. Next, we have the location, which is again coming from the parameter, and then followed by the number of different properties which are linked or associated with the storage account. Now, if you look at that, just to create a storage account, I have to use 180 lines of storage account ARM template code. And this ARM template is nothing just a JSON template. Now, it gives me a thing. Now, if you think about it, it has two issues. First, you need to have the understanding of the JSON, and even though if you are expert in the JSON, then managing such a large complex JSON is going to be a tedious job. And remember, we are just talking about here a simplest Azure resource, but consider a scenario where we require to provision hundreds of servers or the complex infrastructure. Then managing this infrastructure with the help of these ARM templates is going to be a tedious job. Next, next you have three options. First, you can click on download to download the template, or you can add to the library so that this template can be utilized in future if you want to provision a similar number of storage account with a different name or the different parameter configuration. The third option we have is to click on deploy, and that will help you to deploy this instance using this particular ARM template, which we have it right now on this screen. I've clicked on the deploy button. As you can see that now we can see all those parameters which were available in the ARM template section in the JSON mod. I'll select my resource group again. If you want, you can click on edit parameter or edit template, and then again you can modify the parameter values, or if you want, you can modify the parameter values right here from this particular section. I can click here on create and review, and that will help me to and that will give me an option to read the terms and conditions which I should be agree to create a resource, which I am. Then I'll click on create button to create another storage account, and this time with the ARM template. So our infrastructure resource is created successfully. So if I go to resource, and if I look at carefully, we should have two storage account. One of them is created manually directly from the portal, and again the second one was created from portal but with the help of ARM template. And this was the simplest demonstration to provision the infrastructure in Azure from the Azure portal manually. Now, just to summarize our demonstration, the infrastructure in Azure was created with the help of ARM template, which we can use to automate our infrastructure. So even though if you deploy the infrastructure manually from the Azure portal, behind the scene it makes or it generates the ARM template, and that ARM template gets invoked at the backend, right? And the way it invokes in the backend is Azure uses the APIs, built-in APIs. So Azure has APIs which is used to deploy the infrastructure with the help of ARM template. So you need In order to deploy the infrastructure with Azure, especially you need the ARM template and the APIs which will be used to deploy your infrastructure. When we click on create button to deploy the infrastructure, behind the scene Azure converts this ARM template into this kind of a JSON, and it gets deployed or send the JSON on this particular URL, which is management.azure.com/subscription/subscription ID, and then the resource group and the story account type, which is the type of the resource. And then subsequently, you would have the request body in which the story account properties will be mentioned as in request body. And this is how the infrastructure is usually provisioned. I hope this has given you some idea how do you provision the infrastructure and how the infrastructure provisioning in Azure works manually.